Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Carylynn Larson. I'm based in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States. And to start, I'd like to invite everyone listening to think of the last time that someone in your life was clearly struggling. Did you show up for them, or did you step back? Not because you didn't care, but because you didn't know what to say, or maybe you thought it wouldn't do much good. During the pandemic, I found out that one of my colleagues was struggling with depression. And what did I do? I backed off. I stopped emailing. I stopped calling. Stopped inviting her to meetings. I basically gave up on her. I fell into a really common trap. I started making excuses. We think things like, oh, I don't want to step on their toes. If they really wanted to talk about it, they'd say something right. Or we think, I don't know what to say. I'm not an expert in this stuff. So that was me. And then we get the guilt. Because instinctively, I think we know that we're letting people down when we do that. But I'm here to tell you and to remind myself that the villain in those stories, it's not us. You see, I believe that the villain is this sneaky thing that we call stigma. Stigma lodges itself in the back of our brain. And from there, it tells our subconscious that mental health challenges, well, they're dangerous. They're something that you should avoid. See, stigma, it doesn't just silence suffering. It silences support. And I'm really embarrassed to admit it, but I used to think that mental health wasn't that relevant to me because I was good. I was smart, strong. I think of myself that way. But then pressure and disappointment and ultimately this deep sense of despair just started to weigh on me. And what did I do? I went to the bar. Probably not the bar you're thinking of, because I went to the salad bar. I took just a few carrots because that's all I felt like I deserved. I wasn't there to eat. I was there to starve. And without any warning whatsoever, that wasn't just an impulse. That was an addiction. Every day, I felt compelled to eat less and to weigh less. And before I knew it, I'd lost 7 years and so many relationships to an eating disorder. My roommates at the time, they were tired of seeing me self-destruct and they moved out. I had lots of friends, and many of them probably wanted to say something, but when they didn't know what to say, they couldn't pretend like nothing was wrong. And so they stopped calling. And then there were lots of people who tried to help, but they say things like, "Oh, you're not fat. You could eat a whole pint of ice cream and you'd be just fine." But here's what I know now. They all cared, just as you care about the people in your life. But because of stigma, most of us have no clue how to show up effectively, especially when mental health is part of the story. And that has to change, because the only way for us to turn the tide on mental health is to start to show up for one another. For me, it started on a morning like every other morning. I'd gotten up really early before dawn, and I'd forced myself to go out on a really long run. I'd run down this trail through the woods in the pitch dark, pushing myself to go faster and longer until exhaustion and adrenaline sort of filled up the emptiness I felt inside me. And then most days, I wouldn't even stop there. I'd go and teach an aerobics class, and I'd go to the gym, and I'd lift weights. I would do anything to avoid sitting with my feelings. But that day, my boss called me into his office. We sat down, and then he kind of gathered himself up and he said, "I'm really concerned about you." I tried to brush him off, like, "Oh, I'm fine." But then he said something that moved me. He said, "You want to be successful, but you're not getting the care you need." That conversation was not easy for him. But that conversation saved my life. It turns out that hard conversations heal. It's both a truth and it's an acronym that we can all use in these moments that matter. The H is for hope. Hold hope. A is for ask. Ask to inspire. R is for risk. Risk being real. And D is for dare. Dare to share. I'll bring each of them to life just a little bit more. Hope. See, we have to believe that people can get better, that they can thrive. Because if we don't believe it, they won't either. And that can be hard, especially when people are caught in these cycles of addiction and avoidance and self-destructive habits. But neuroscience proves that people can change. Brains can be rewired. Lives can be transformed. Hold hope. Ask. You know, a great question is worth more than 1,000 pieces of advice, because asking makes people think more. Advising, it makes them think less. So the next time you're so sure that you have the key to someone else's success, put it down and just ask instead, "Hey, what would open that door for you?" And if the first thing they say is, "I don't know," then you might just be onto something. Because the best questions are the ones that people don't have their answer to yet. Ask to inspire. risk. When I came home from a months-long stay in residential treatment, I was terrified that people would judge me if they knew the truth. So every time someone would say something like, "Hey, where have you been?" I would freeze. I mean, I could easily make up a story. But most of the time, I chose to be real. And every time I share my story, I hear plenty more from people who can relate. Being real about our own mental health challenges, it's one of the most healing things we can do because it makes it safe for others to be real too. And maybe you're listening in and you're thinking, but I don't have any mental health challenges that I could share. If that's you, I'm just going to respectfully call BS on that because none of us are thriving in every area of our life. Risk being real. Dare. One of the most toxic things that stigma does is scare us into silence. Even thinking about it makes our heart race. So we get advice from people and we write out what we want to say and we play out these conversations in our heads. But then in the moment, we keep our thoughts to ourselves. Sharing concerns is hard because it takes courage. To be healing, we have to dare to share. Hope, ask, risk, dare.
Wow, you have had an incredible journey. What's really fascinating listening to you is that you've lived on both sides of this conversation, being one who was struggling and now one who's helping others. What experience shaped you more and why?
Of the two,
Mm,
by far, the experience that shaped me more was being the one who needed help. I think it's very easy to intellectualize helping other people.
yeah.
It's very humbling when you're the one who can't get out of your own way. I was once told by a therapist that I was too smart for my own good, and there was no way I was going to think myself
Out of
out of
it.
my eating disorder.
Yes. Wow. That's powerful. Now, when you shared that powerful story about your eating disorder, what did that season teach you about silence, shame, and stigma?
Yeah, I think I experienced so much of a sense of shame. It was very, very difficult for me to get the support that I deserved.
Yeah.
And for a while, I didn't even think I deserved it because there's so much of the stigma also makes you judge yourself. So it's not just that we judge other people, we judge ourselves. But I vividly remember my heart just racing every time I tried to do something that I needed to do, like call a therapist or, I mean, my goodness, I nearly had a panic attack when I told my husband at the time that I felt like I needed to go to a treatment center. I literally thought it would kill me to have that conversation with him.
Mm. Wow. Wow. But you plucked up the courage and you did it anyway. Now, the moment that you were talking to your boss, when your boss chose to speak up, what made that moment so different from all the others, do you think?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it was his way of showing up. It was the fact that he didn't try to tell me what I needed to do. He just shared a very powerful observation.
Yeah.
And even embedded in his observation was his deep knowing of me. He said it very simply, but it was clear that he was bringing this up because he wanted for me what I wanted for myself. He didn't make it about him or anything else. He didn't make it about work. He made it about me.
I like that. Now, you said something so powerful that stigma doesn't just silence suffering, it silences support. Can you unpack what that really means for us in everyday life?
Yeah. It means that we need to recognize that we will have a tendency to react based on something that's driving us at a very subconscious level, something that's making us feel fear and feel threat where there really is none. That's basically what stigma does.
Yeah.
Stigma is judgment and fear. And so when we're exposed to someone, we have someone in our life who's struggling with their mental health or any other thing that stigma is affecting, we need to recognize that our emotional reaction will not be rational to that. And so we'll have to do a lot to stay in that really critical thinking part of our brain.
Yes. Challenging. Now, why do you think so many of us hesitate to show up for people we love when they are struggling?
I think the fear really does silence us, scares us off. It manifests in so many ways, several of them of which I mentioned. It makes us think that we'll do more harm than good. It makes us think that we don't know what we're doing. It makes us really, and sometimes it literally just steals the words out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Like we'll sit across the table, have every intent of having a hard conversation with someone, and then we'll just go quiet. So I think that's a huge part of it. And I think that that can be overcome. And we know that bias and stigma are things that we can overcome. And how do we overcome them? We overcome them by recognizing the lies we tell ourselves and replacing them with truth, and doing that over and over and over again until we're able to stay in that really critical thinking part of our brain.
Yeah. And you're right. You said something important there, the lies that we tell ourselves. We do have that internal dialogue that's just yakking away all the time. We stop trusting ourselves. So, what are the biggest myths that people believe about mental health that we need to challenge right now?
I love that question. One relates to this idea that total trap I fell into for most of my life, which was that it wasn't relevant. So we hear the words mental health, and most people have just a visceral reaction to that, actually. They assume that it means a diagnosis of some sort. They assume that mental health is inherently negative, instead of just recognizing that it's a really broad spectrum and that thriving is also part of health and mental health. So that's a big one, is just recognizing that mental health is absolutely relevant to every single person.
Yeah.
Sort of related, a myth is this idea that if we've made it this far, we wouldn't end up with a significant mental health challenge or crisis. And that's just not true. What we know is that there's nothing that provides immunity to mental health, just like there's nothing that provides immunity from cancer or something like that.
Yes.
And that mental health challenges, they're qualitatively different than physical health challenges, but they're not as different as we make them out to be. They have lots of similarities.
So, for someone who says, I don't want to say the wrong thing, what would you say to them?
I would say that staying quiet And not saying anything at all is probably the most damaging thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And at the same time, making light of something very serious
Mm-hmm.
is not going to be beneficial. And so giving some thought to what you do want to say and empowering yourself with some helpful frameworks, like my Hard Conversations Heal framework. It can make it easier for you. And getting in the right mindset to show up with that sense of hope is really important.
I think if you're just authentic as well, the person you're trying to help will sense it, even if you don't have the right words, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
bring yourself to the conversation.
absolutely.
Authenticity does it. So, what has been the hardest truth that you've had to face about yourself on your healing journey, do you think?
So, one of, I'd say probably the hardest truth is that I have lots of feelings and that they're very real and that they deserve to take up space. Um, it sounds simple, but for many, many years, I just, even well prior to a mental health crisis, I didn't really want to engage with feelings. They just didn't feel useful to me.
Right.
So acknowledging that there is no joy without pain. Like you don't get to have it one way. It's either all of it or none of
One
it.
thing. Yeah, that is so true. It is all or nothing.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, you talk about risking being real. What does that look like when fear is still present, do you think?
Yeah, I think it looks like not having to necessarily have it get it right. Um, I think unfortunately, sometimes it looks like oversharing, to be honest with you, and maybe that's something
Mhm.
I would encourage people to guard against.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're afraid, we fill up space, and so we could easily make a conversation about us, and that's not the point. The point is to say just enough to make it feel safe for the other person to be
Yes.
real without making it about yourself instead of just taking up airtime.
I like that. So, if every workplace, every family and community embraced healing conversations, how would the world look different, do you think?
Oh my goodness. I honestly think that this is absolutely essential. And that I'm not saying that because I don't believe in the power of therapy or professionals. I absolutely do wholeheartedly. I needed lots of it. I need lots of it myself. And yet, if we have to go to a professional to have a healing conversation, it's just never going to be enough. We need to be surrounded by support at all times.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
that's support structure should be there constantly.
absolutely.
It's not
Yeah.
a one thing, right?
I honestly think we would turn the tide on mental health if everyone or if just trend in the right direction if more
Mhm.
people had these structures. We've done research on it. Our research suggests that only 20 to 35% of people have someone who shows up for them in that way. So that
Wow.
means the great majority of people do not.
Have That's a big percentage that's missing.
Yeah.
So your story is now helping others to heal. What does that mean to you to turn your pain into purpose?
I don't know what I would do without it because if you can't do that, then it just seems like such a chunk of life was lost for nothing. So, yeah, the first thing I started to do when I started to feel a freedom from the eating disorder was found a nonprofit, because I had to make sense. I had to make sense of it all. And the sense I could make out of it was that I went through it in order to be of service to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this beautiful nonprofit. It's called Rock Recovery. It bridges treatment gaps for people that are struggling with eating disorders. And it's been the greatest joy.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely transmuted everything into something so positive. My last two questions for you are a bit of a thought experiment. In the first one, I'm going to teleport you back to that young woman who was struggling. If you could go back and give her 3 nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those 3 nuggets of wisdom be?
I'm trying to put myself back in those shoes and really reflect on what I would hear. I think one thing that I needed to hear more deeply, and that eventually I did, was that I wasn't alone. And I knew other people who had struggled with eating disorders, or even actively, but I didn't feel together with them in my journey of recovery. It felt like we were on parallel paths, but our paths didn't intersect. So this idea of finding a community of people that was doing recovery together was incredibly important for me. So just the nugget of wisdom that you're not alone, and that healing happens in community. I'll use that as 2, that healing happens in community. That's massive for me. And then perhaps the third would be that all of us are traumatized in some ways. It doesn't have to feel like capital T trauma, like you might be diagnosed with PTSD or something like that, although many, many people are, and that's very real. But every single human on this earth is traumatized. And so understanding how trauma impacts our brain, and then what we need to do to rewire ourselves so we're not just constantly reacting to the world out of a place of hurt, it's really important.
Wow, you've touched on some really powerful things there. But for me, I think community, like you said, it is everything. You don't have to suffer alone. There's others who can support you on the journey. Beautiful reminder. And I'm so glad you started this nonprofit as well.
Thank you.
Because now people know where to go to find that help. Last question, I'll teleport you into the future. And we are going to go and sit with a 90-year-old you. She's sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her family. Maybe she's on a dance floor somewhere with science and technology. I can see you on your feet. We could teleport to go and meet this wise woman who has led you up until this point. What will you say to her when you finally meet her?
Oh, that's such a deep question. May I make it to the age of 90? That would be amazing to start. I think I would tell her. What would I tell her? What would I tell her, not what she would tell me?
What would you tell her?
Whew, that's a flip on the script of a typical question too, by the way. Way to get me. I think I would tell her that it was all worth it. I think I would tell her that she's enough. I think that's something I always struggle with, even current day, that I'm enough. I don't have to do anything more. I'm enough. And somehow I guess I don't think I'll grow out of that by age 90. So there we go. My 90-year-old self will also need to hear that.
I love it. I love it. You know, the reason why I like to ask women that last question is that a lot of women don't realize that the wise woman is already in us. That she's that quiet voice that prompts us to go left, go right, say yes, say no. She's there, but we look outside of ourselves for solutions all the time. Sometimes in the stillness of prayer and meditation, you can go within and tune into the energy of who you are becoming. And just trust the feeling and the voice when it comes. So thank you for trusting your wise woman. She empowered you to seek the help that you needed, to create this amazing nonprofit that's now helping women. You know, she's there. She is guiding you every step of the way, and it's beautiful to see it firsthand. Now, is there anything else I should have asked you and I didn't?
Maybe what my call to action would be for people, because I have one.
Yep. What would that be?
Do I get to answer my question? Oh, how fun. It's simple. It's to think about the people. It goes back to what I said before, to think about the people around you who are struggling or who aren't okay, and to show up for them. Be courageous and show up.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with our community today. You have definitely empowered me, empowered a lot of women who will listen to this podcast to find a way to find the help that they need when they find themselves in situations where they can't do it alone, and to seek those communities that can support you, uplift you, and energize you as well. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Thank you for listening. If you are a woman who's struggling, don't do it alone. Or if you know somebody who needs this podcast, please tag them. Share this on your social media as well so we can reach more people. I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Carylynn, thank you again for the interview.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.